So the time has finally arrived. I am running my free masterclass for professional career women on how to unlock the power of your existing wardrobe without maxing out your time or budget. So think about if you are looking for effortless daily style with zero chaos. Come and join me and register for this free masterclass. So I have a few times that I am running the masterclass. So pick the masterclass that suits you and come and join me. If you have been challenged with trying to work out why it is that your wardrobe's no longer working for you, how do you actually start to build a wardrobe that saves you time and money at the same time? Come and join me. In this masterclass, I will cover off on the concepts of style misalignment. Do you actually have it? And can you actually align your personal and professional style without it costing an arm and a leg? To trying to figure out what is your unique personal style? How do you even get that? And what do you need to do to get there quickly? And then finally, once you've got those two pieces, then how do you go about rebuilding your wardrobe? I would love to see you on the other side. So if you're interested in registering, details will be below in the show notes. I hope to see you there. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Style and Strategy Podcast. Today, I have the opportunity to speak with Vanessa Bennett, CEO of Next Evolution Performance, a global high-performance coaching business. So get ready for an insightful conversation on optimizing leadership for sustainable success, with, of course, a touch of brand and style. I'm Sonia, a personal brand and style coach. My journey began in the corporate world and through lived experiences has led me where I am today. I've walked in those uncomfortable shoes, faced the same challenges and questioned my path to professional success while simultaneously navigating my personal style journey and the challenges that each decade brings. I wholeheartedly believe in the fusion of personal brand and style strategy. My mission here is to provide you with practical, actionable strategies and lived experiences to help you unlock your next level of success through the power of personal brand and style. Let's get started. Vanessa, welcome to the Style and Strategy Podcast.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Great to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So you've got a really interesting background. And, obviously you worked in financial services and financial advice in that space, but now you're a performance coach. Why don't you take me through a little bit how you went from sort of in that financial services space into becoming a performance coach?
Yeah, it's always a great question. And I think very bravely was the answer to that question. But I think people think it's very different. People think it's like, oh my gosh, that's going from like one thing to something that's completely different. And actually it's not. Like I was running a sales team and you're running for high performance, right? Like you've got to hit your targets. You've got to have the right mindset. You've got to be organized. You've got one number in 12 months and sort that out. And then I was running a whole team with that. And you really want your team in high performance mode. And that also included during the global financial crisis. So if you're running a sales team during the global financial crisis in financial services, you're basically a high performance coach now. So I think what I found was that was the bit that I actually wanted to do. And I've always been quite data driven and always quite sciencey. So the more science that started to come out in this space, the more I was kind of trying to put that into practice. And then, it just keeps coming, basically. The science just keeps coming now, which is awesome. So, so that's kind of how I'm doing what I do now.
And when you sort of saw that alignment and then you made that decision to, you know what, I'm going to go do this, do you think in some way the brand and the reputation that you had built up, previously had shifted or changed when you then moved into the high performance market and being your own boss?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in some ways it did, But in a lot of ways, I was actually able to capitalize on the brand that I'd built already. Because when you first start out in your own business, obviously, the biggest thing you need to do is obviously get clients. And I was absolutely blown away by how helpful people were with me,
Yeah.
either taking me on in the companies that they were working for or referring me to other people. So I think the brand that I built up already was very much one to capitalize on. I think when I started to move into my own business, I was able to move just a bit quicker on things as well. And I probably got a lot more streamlined on things too, where I think probably when I was running a sales team, and I think about even just like, the clothes that I'd wear and things like that, like I could spend a lot more sort of effort and energy worrying about that kind of stuff. Whereas in your own business, it's like there is no time for that. So I'm very probably sort of like a wash and go kind of vibe now.
Love that. And so do you think that if you had to think about three words maybe that defined how you now empower individuals to kind of show up and I guess step up in their professional journey, what would you say that looks like?
Yeah, I think, obviously I'm focusing on high performance. So I'm focusing on people who are already doing well and just want to keep excelling.
Mm,
So I think that's a really important thing to focus on. So I think, just showing up generally. And I think even after hybrid, even that's taken on a whole new meaning these days, right? It's
mm,
like people are a bit sort of like, oh no, I don't want to go into the office and that kind of thing. And I just think it doesn't matter where you are, but you need to make sure that your presence is felt and you need to literally do that, show up. So
yeah.
it shouldn't be something that we're shying away from. High performers should really be there, showing up and meaning business.
Yeah. And so when you think about, we hear a lot about, look, you've got to tap into your full potential. You've got to lead in a way that is authentic, whether it's for your teams and for yourself to actually show up as your best self. What do you think are some of those secret ingredients to actually get someone to reach their full potential?
Yeah, mindset's got a big part of that. I think when I'm talking with leaders, I think the biggest thing that I find in a lot of cases is people spend a lot of energy, especially, and everything that we do is all about cognitive energy. And people spend a lot of
Mm,
energy on, well, should I say that? Should I be that? And I even had a conversation with a client this morning, and it was almost like, when you're really direct, it's almost like in a corporate environment, they kind of want to beat that out of you. And
mm,
you know what? The world needs more directness. Like, we need to stop shying away from that kind of thing. Now, obviously, we need to create an environment and a culture, for high performance where we're not saying everyone's going to be really rude to each other, but it's like people need to be able to cope with people being direct with them.
mm.
And they shouldn't be shying away from being direct to other people if that's just going to get the job done and not take things personally and things like that. So I think there's a lot of people who are having trouble being their authentic selves as leaders because, the classic corporate kind of environment have said, oh, you
Mm,
too much this and you're too much that and you're not enough this and you're not enough that. And it's like these days we've got a whole stack of research saying these are the outcomes that you should get as a leader. And that's your roadmap. And if you can get your team saying these 8 things, then how you get there, that's up to you. And so we present the research to people, but then we also help them to tap into what is their most authentic way to get those results. And I use this example all the time, either when I'm coaching people or in workshops. I used to always get told in corporate, you're too direct, you're too direct. And it's like, well, I can't be less direct. That would be exhausting for the next 60 years of my career. The question is, how do I reduce the carnage around my directness? So,
mm.
if I can show up in a way that's letting people know that I would never want to make anyone feel bad or insecure or anything like that is absolutely not my intention. I will be mortified if that was a result. But I do need to preempt some things sometimes so that I can get people to be okay with my directness and not take it personally, not try to read between the lines, all of that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that authentic leadership that you've touched on, the corporates kind of inadvertently try to beat you out of it if they don't have great research and great neuroscience
Mm,
on how we can let people be their best selves. And Leadership 2005, like it's changed people. We need
yeah.
neuroscience and we need to understand more of that. And, we need to up our leadership game.
So do you think when you're talking with corporates potentially who are maybe supporting leaders to go through some of your programs that you've got, that they are more so in tune with what is required and hence therefore looking for you for that guidance?
Definitely. So the research says, so I've got a master's in neuroscience, and the research basically supports that you are far more effective in introducing a lot of these different programs and frameworks and mindset interventions and all of these kind of things. You're far more effective when people understand the science and the research first. So if we can help people understand that in, say, and that can be delivered in a workshop environment or something like that first, but if we can help people understand the science, it almost becomes like, well, there's the science. Now, what do you want to do about that?
Yeah.
And that becomes very effective. So generally we're looking at working with businesses where they've got an appetite for that science. They just want to do things smarter. So there's a really big appetite at the moment. And interestingly enough, especially up in Asia, I've just come back from Asia and there were some great conversations I was having up there. They're wanting to really lift performance, but in a smart way. There's an appetite for we want to try to lift performance and productivity and profitability, but in a way that's, not killing people in the process. So there's definitely a lot more appetite for the science behind that because we can do that now. The more you understand about neuroscience, the more that you can understand how to use that to lift productivity and profitability, but also make things feel easier for people in the process. And that's the nirvana. It shouldn't be this whole performance versus wellness thing. Performance is 100% always the goal. When the CEO of Salesforce came out and said, actually, we need to focus on this performance thing instead of this wellness thing. It's like, he actually did kind of have a point, all right? He was like, come on, people, we can't be pleading pandemic forever. We have to get together and it's no more business as usual. We have to focus on growth. We have to focus on new strategic initiatives. We have to focus more on creativity and better leadership. So, but the upshot of that is if you do it in a scientific way, you actually get both. You get happier, healthier people who are performing better. And that's what we should be aiming for across the board.
Because you're really then focusing on the whole individual rather than just one or the other. And it's really interesting because one of the things that I'm really fascinated through when it comes to style particularly is the psychology of style on an individual and how that can then either push them to become more confident in themselves to therefore put them in unusual situations or things like that, because there's a level of confidence that comes out through that. And there have been some studies that I've read where, they've triggered the difference between someone who turns up for work wearing, it might be their leggings or whatever it is, and versus, especially during COVID, et cetera, versus actually going through that whole exercise of having a shower, getting changed and getting dressed for work and then showing up even from a performance perspective. We might not be talking high performance there, but we're talking about just to get you and have a shift in kind of mindset through that process as well.
It's so true. I was looking at some research around that kind of thing and, people being on Zoom for so long and all of that kind of stuff. And there was definitely some research coming out about how we present ourselves in meetings is definitely a factor and influence. Like if we're just kind of that's that sort of, a lot of people, would have their cameras off and it's like, oh, but I haven't gotten dressed yet. And it's like, well, seriously, show up. I've never met anyone who was fully engaged in a meeting with their camera off.
Yeah.
And I think, if you've gotten dressed and gotten up and gone through that process, and I used to encourage people even to sort of walk to work in inverted commas, get up, go out for 15 minutes and then come back and be in a kind of a bit of a different mindset. And there was also some research, and I didn't look at it too closely, but I do remember seeing something around how your brain is actually getting confused if you're the whole newsreader kind of thing, which we all did, which was, the very professional top and the jacket and all that kind of stuff, but you're in your tracky ducks and your Ugg boots, down below. And there was even something showing that even your brain's getting a bit confused by that. Kind of pick one persona and roll with it. So I think it's got a big impact on your mindset.
And you talked about that when you were sort of in the financial services space that, you might have feedback talking about directness and things like that. How do you think your style potentially was back then, knowing that you were in that space versus maybe where you are today?
Yeah, I think I'm probably more streamlined now. So still very direct back then, but I used to like to play with fashion probably a little bit more than what I do now. Now I'm just very streamlined, and I think it probably comes down to I travel a lot for work. So I'm literally like everything in my wardrobe has to match, so that when I'm, it's dark and I'm trying to pack for a trip or something like that, it's like I know that if I pull a jacket from there and a pair of pants from there and a dress from there, I've basically got 3 days worth of clothes to wear. So for me now, it's more streamlined. I know probably my direct personality is probably more attuned to that actually. I wear similar colors all the time, similar styles all the time. I'm obviously not like into frills or anything like that. It's just like, no, nice, plain, straight kind of dresses, similar, nicely structured jackets, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, my personality is probably getting even more direct now because I'm allowed to be a little more. In fact, I love the way that people actually pay me for that these days. It's like, they don't want me to mess around. They're paying for results. And so the faster I get there, the better. So I feel like I really found my sweet spot. And so I think my clothing probably represents that as well. I'm probably quite direct and deliberate in, no mess, no fuss. One of my good friends, she calls me no mess Ness. And I'm like, yeah, that probably kind of sums things up.
I like that. And when you're thinking about some really strong high performance leaders that have come to be coached by you and for you to be able to take them to that next level, how much of where they are today was really related back to their personal brand versus how much in order to get them to that really next level is something else?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it's almost like a bit of a chicken and an egg question as well.
Yeah.
So sometimes the way that people are, it kind of influences their personal brand, and then that sort of then becomes like this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, some people kind of like, I think I need a rebrand. It's like, maybe, okay, well, let's see how we go. But I mean, I coach probably more males than I do females just because that's the nature of there's just more of them out there in these kind of roles, unfortunately, but that's kind of how it is. But even still, it's almost like they still want to play with their personal brand in terms of their shirts and ties and combos. And, they're now starting to bring in more. It's not just the suit kind of situation. They've got more ability now to, have a bit more of that business casual kind of look. And a lot of them are really kind of embracing that a little bit as well, which is actually nice to watch. And you wouldn't have seen that, 20 years ago in the corporate space. So I think the fact that we've kind of got a bit of business casual coming in is actually probably allowing people to kind of really tap into that. So yeah, so I think the females and males doesn't really matter. I think it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, and so I think that also comes down to it's almost like how you show up and what you're wearing and things like that can actually influence like how you think about yourself and your confidence, obviously, and then that becomes it's called neuroplasticity basically, but it's creation of neural pathways and the brain's ability to change itself and all that kind of thing. So I think it's like if we don't make an effort to show up both physically and mentally, then that actually impacts the brain and the way that you think, and it impacts your confidence. And so I think it is actually important to make sure that you're doing everything that you can physically and mentally to feel like you are showing up and having that confidence. Because, I mean, this happens to males as well. Like, I don't know why people even bother talking about imposter syndrome anymore. Like, literally, unless you're a narcissist, you basically have it. So let's not call it a thing. Let's not get caught up with it. Let's create more clarity in what we're achieving in terms of our leadership outcomes. And then let's help people stop second guessing themselves and get there as quickly as we can. Before the research, we didn't have a lot of research saying this is the outcomes that we should be getting from our teams. But now we do. And that's just meant that leaders can spend less time second guessing themselves as well. And so let's just show up. Let's not give any mental energy to, am I good enough? Am I this? Am I that? Like, let's just show up and get it done.
Yeah, that's really interesting about the imposter syndrome and the consideration that everyone's really got it, because females really struggle on that end, but you hear it probably more from that side. So given that you work with a number of males, and also then probably hearing some of that maybe play out in that space, it starts to break down some of the stereotypes that you potentially hear across the board as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think I'm all about helping people to build neural pathways and thought processes that are serving them and to pay less attention to those thought processes and neural pathways that aren't serving them. So
Yeah.
your brain's like a muscle and it's wired for defense. So of course it's wired for imposter syndrome, right? So naturally we need to make sure that we understand that and then we know how to think more helpfully in ways that are going to help us to achieve our goals.
So you are also a qualified fitness instructor as well. Right. So let's just add that to the list. I love the multi-dimensional aspect of you. One of the key elements I think that goes really hand in hand with high performance is also some level of there's exercise, fitness, all of that component. What's your kind of view on that in terms of how much of that really can also make a difference in that space?
Look, it's massive. When you look at the impact of even just movement, I don't even want to call it exercise, just the impact of movement on the brain, it's phenomenal. Just even like, so I teach group fitness classes and even just that coordination, that's helping us to kind of think differently and be more creative. And even for me as an instructor, like I have to learn the choreography, that kind of memory sort of work, like I like to think it's doing a great job of creating the process of neurogenesis, which is the production of new neurons. But when you look at the impact of movement on the brain in terms of the neurotransmitters that it releases, that's very beneficial for the process of neurogenesis and also combating excess cortisol in the body as well, which is your stress hormone, which is fine in small doses, but most people don't have it in small doses. They have it in a lot bigger doses than what we were ever really designed to have. And that's just, really simple things. But in terms of being able to promote memory, being able to promote creativity, productivity, helping you sleep better. And of course, we know how great sleep is for our brain and our bodies as well. But it's like, stress is affecting literally every cell in our bodies. And there is stress, which is okay and productive. But once you go into that next phase of stress where it is just chronic and it's there too much, then, those processes are causing inflammation, which is affecting mood, mental health, behavior. You go back to the office after you've done a workout and you're far more delightful to be around. Well, that can only be good for culture. People used
Definitely.
People used to say to me, how do you teach on top of working? And I'm like, I don't know how you don't. It's very therapeutic yelling at people, after a day or during a day in the middle of the day. So yeah, I just think, for me, the actual physical exercise is very useful, but even just the process of having to teach, learning the choreography, and I switch off completely because when I'm teaching a class, I'm doing a move, I'm cueing the next move, and I'm thinking about the next move after that. So it's like, I'm not thinking about, what am I having for dinner? Or, what did that person mean when they said that? Like, it's just doesn't even enter my, what's going on in my brain situation. So it just means that so many people focus on, I've got to switch off. And it's like, no, you actually just need to switch to something else. So for me, that's a great way to switch fully and completely because I can't be anything but present. If I'm not present, then a whole bucket load of people run into each other because I haven't cued them properly. So, I think that's a big part of it. So there's so many just amazing benefits to productivity, mindset, mood, everything. Like if I don't sweat like properly every day, like I can feel it in my brain. I couldn't care, the physical impacts it's having, but I know it's having massive impacts just from a brain perspective. I mean, like good, if it's stopping me getting cancers and things like that, that's also good. But, I think there's just so many benefits that help us to just think more clearly and have a better culture and help us with emotional regulation. Emotional regulation in the workplace as a leader is your superpower. So being able to have that is absolutely essential. And exercise just plays a massive role in doing that.
And I think, I love what you've said there about it's actually being able to not just switch off, but actually redirect your brain into something completely different and what that can do. So, yeah, I really love that. So I've got 3 quick questions for you. One being, What would be your go-to style or signature piece that feels truly represents your personal brand, and why is it an essential part of your wardrobe?
I think it probably would have to be any of my Karen G dresses. And they're all sort of customized to me because
Beautiful.
I'm quite little. And so therefore I actually have trouble getting a lot of stuff off the rack. I'm little, but I'm tall. So I'm kind of like this just really weird shape. And so she does a lot of like made to measure stuff, and the
Mm.
fabric's beautiful. She even made my wedding dress. And I just feel like the fabric is just made to, come onto me basically. And they're all very streamlined kind of styles. I don't get anything with the frills or anything like that. It's all pretty streamlined, but they're comfortable. For me, if I'm like going from a keynote presentation and then straight onto a plane, I still want to be comfortable. And so many times you wear things and it's like, oh, it looked great on the stage, but not that comfortable. Whereas with those kind of clothes, it's just it's streamlined. It feels good. I feel professional, but not over the top. So yeah, it's good.
Love a little bit of KG. Okay, then for our listeners looking for inspiration, what book are you either currently reading or maybe listening to that has had a significant impact on your personal brand and or leadership journey?
I think a book that probably everyone does need to read, and I loved it because it was so direct. It's called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And it's basically looking at, in any situation, there'll be 90% of people that will see something as an obstacle, and 10% of people will be able to see that as an opportunity. And
Mm.
it's also very much about personal accountability. And I think, the world doesn't owe you anything. The whole idea is we need to make sure that, we are taking opportunities by the horns, and I think the level of accountability of everyone in the world at the moment is just declining. And quite frankly, it wasn't great to start with. So, we're in a bit of a bad way. But, it's like, oh, well, I feel triggered by this and it's everyone else's fault. It's like,
Yeah.
really? Really? So I really love that book because it's like, it's all about your life is your problem and your opportunity, and, only you can be in control of that. So I think that should basically be standard issue, I think, for anyone being born today.
Well, I think that being able to just take, exactly as you said, take your life and make it to what you want to be rather than potentially just sitting back and wanting someone else to maybe hand it to you or someone to tell you. It's go explore, go find out, go determine what that next step is, what that's going to look like for you. My final question is, and I think you've answered some of this, but let's see if you've got something different. We all have those days where we need an extra boost. What's your quick mindset ritual that helps you feel empowered and ready to tackle anything?
Yeah, I think just being aware of your mindset. So I do mindset training pretty much every day. So I probably do it even more so when I go to sleep. So as I'm falling asleep in bed, because if that's the last thing that your brain thinks about, that's what it processes overnight. So if you're feeding it with stuff that you're really stressed about and woe is me and, oh, I didn't do that very well and I didn't do that very well and I could have done that better, that's kind of what your brain's going to be processing over the night. And that's not really helpful because that's how you'll wake up in the morning. So I think what your mindset is before you go to bed actually really has a massive impact on how you wake up the next day. And, of course, there's going to be certain days where it's like, oh, man, I really need to, listen to what I tell everyone else today and whatnot. So, no one's perfect at this by any stretch of the imagination. But one of the things that I like to coach on in our workshops is this concept we call #crushing life, which is your brain can't tell the difference between something which is like really amazing, like I just won $100 million in the lottery, or something that you make believe like it's really amazing, like I literally just made the bus and I don't have to wait 5 minutes for the next one, but you get excited by that.
Yeah.
So the more that you can get excited by the dumb stuff, your brain responds in the same way as if it was the $100 million lottery. So if you can use every opportunity of just really dumb stuff to create a really positive emotion. So this neuroplasticity, it's like we just need to continue to do more of that. And so we need to be able to choose our thoughts very carefully. So I think probably and this is kind of for everybody, we often have these days where it's like, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I'm actually thinking a bit negatively. Like I'm a bit, you might have a meeting that didn't go as well or something like that or whatever. And it's kind of like, oh my gosh, woe is me. And then it's like, no, I'm just very quick at recognizing when I think that and go, hang on, this is not helpful. All right. If this is putting extra muscle on the unhelpful wiring in my brain, why would I do that? So I need to consciously think about something that's going to create more muscle in the helpful wiring, in the helpful neural pathways in my brain. So I think just having a really solid understanding of, neuroplasticity compared to the average person, I can kind of see that quickly. I can see when I'm doing that, and I can recognize when that's not helpful, and I can intercept quite quickly. And I think that's a really important part, because your brain can't have a negative emotion at the same time as it has a positive one. So even if you have a positive emotion for like 10 seconds, that's still 10 seconds that you're building better wiring rather than another 10 seconds that you're adding to less helpful wiring. So yeah.
Absolutely fascinating, and so many more than one tip in that segment completely. So there's a few things I'll be taking away from that one. It's been absolute pleasure having you on the Style and Strategy podcast. If someone wants to find you or potentially work with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Oh, absolutely. I'm very easy to stalk on LinkedIn. That's my main platform. So Vanessa Bennett and Next Evolution Performance. So our website's also a great source of information on this kind of thing. So www.nextevolutionperformance.com. And again, we're very easy to find there. So you can book a performance call and ask me anything, and I can point you in the right direction.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ness. I will have all those details in the show notes for the podcast. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I've got a lot of tips to take away. So take care. Thank you so much for being part of this inspiring episode. If you found value in today's discussion, please don't keep it a secret. Share it with a friend on social media, tag me at Your Style Collective, and leave a review. Your support means the world. Join me again next week for another empowering episode of Style and Strategy, the Leadership Series. Thanks so much for tuning in. And remember, you're already taking that first step towards your transformation journey. See you next time.